Hello, welcome to Croft House. Today I'm going to be replacing a roller blind with a tab bottomed valance. The reason being, the customer has had curtains made in this fabric, which is synthetic, part synthetic, and you can't stiffen synthetic fabric successfully to make a roller blind. You need to soak it in a solution, and if it doesn't stiffen fully, then you're going to have all the fraying bits on the end and you'll be forever snipping them. So we decided, as the blinds were actually never drawn, that we would make valances that would just stay in place. And the curtains have tabs on the top, and so on the valance we're going to put tabs on the bottom to blend in with the curtains and make everything match. Now, as well as the fabric, I'm going to be lining them in some sole-proof lining. This helps reflect the sun and keep the heat out and protect whatever you're making, whether it's curtains or blinds, a bit longer. The top of the blind will be affixed to this batten, which is going to be screwed onto the wall. I'll drill a couple of holes in it, and I'm going to paint it in the same paint as the wall. You shouldn't see it, but perhaps it depends. If you're walking in a door, you can see the ends and it will just all blend in. If I wasn't going to do that, I'd just paint it with ordinary white emulsion. I will then put on the batten some adhesive backed, I can get it off, Velcro. It's better than the unadhesive because obviously it sticks better, so you just can stick that into place, and then I always put some staples in to hold it more firmly, because whatever you hang on it, if it's quite heavy, it can shift this Velcro over time. And the Velcro is hook that I'm putting on here. I prefer to put the loop, which is not adhesive backed, just sew in Velcro on to a blind or a valance top, because it's just easier to manoeuvre and it doesn't stick to everything. The hook, if you've used it, as you know, you can just stick it to anything and it can get a little bit mucky. So that's the way we're going to be using these. You then just need your thread, and obviously the self thread for the fabric. And I just use what I buy in bulk, a white or an ivory, to machine the bits that aren't going to be seen, just to help save a bit on costs. And then finally, once we've made the valance, put the tabs on. I've got some very nice little café rods with round ends, because the curtain poles have these ball ends, so everything's just going to match. And these are extendable ones. You can't get very many that you can actually cut down, and you'd have to really sort of fiddle about to get the ends on, but actually these ones can be cut, but I don't think I'm going to need to. As long as I've got the tabs in the right place, they should all work very well. Okay, so the next thing to do is just get cracking and get them made up.
So get yourself down to your local timber yard, take your measurements with you and check out what size of wood you want for your battens. Once you've chosen, you can hand your measurements over to a friend who can measure and cut your wood for you whilst you're paying. Let's take a quick look at some calculations. First, measure for the finished valance, deducting the finished tab length to get your main centerpiece. I add 4 centimeters for the top seam allowance. This just allows for any adjustments I might need to make. And I'll add 1.5 to 2 centimeters for the side seams and the base, and also on either end of the tab seam allowances. I'm going to cut the batten a centimetre shorter on both ends than the finished width of the valance. The blind will then have one row of finished top stitching at the base of the blind and 2 rows where the Velcro is attached at the top. For tab calculations, you need to double the width and the length of the finished tab and add your seam allowance. You'll need one more tab than gaps. For evenly spaced tabs, allow same gap width as tab width. Is easy for calculating as well. So divide finished valance width, for example 1.6 meters, divided by the tab width, which is 7 centimeters, and that's going to give you 15.14, which is 8 tabs and 7 gaps. Adjust the gaps to accommodate the 0.14 on the 15.14 division.
The first thing to do with the battens is just check if there's any rough bits where they've been sawn off. Give them a rub with a little bit of sandpaper, check the length, make sure everything's smooth. The next thing is to measure where you're going to put your screws. Because this is a short length, it's only 64 centimetres, I've just gone in 10 centimetres either end, mark that in the middle. This is a longer length, it's 1.29 meters, so I've come in 7 centimetres from the end, divided the central measurement by 3 and put 2 more marks for screws. What screws you use, the length, will depend on the width of your wood, the construction of your wall, as will the raw plugs. A standard raw plug might work, or you might need something a bit more grippy. Make sure your drill bit is the width of your screw, but no wider than the end, and you need a flat end. So once you've marked your holes, if you want to be really sure you're not going to slip, I often give it a little tap with a screw first, and then away you go. Okay, and then continue. And then finally we can start to paint with your matching wall colour. You can just do a white emulsion, as I said before, but it looks quite nice if it matches the wall. You really only need to do the front and the 2 sides. Obviously the back is going to be against the wall. So very simple process for marking and cutting. If you've got a good straight edge on your table, you can butt your selvage against that. If not, you can use the line where the good fabric meets the rough selvage and put your set square either against the table edge or that inner bit of selvage. You can then butt your ruler up against it. Now, never take for granted that you've been cut a straight edge. As you can see, I've got a good inch here and it tapers right off. So move yourself back until you can see that your ruler is going to stay on the fabric. Mark that straight edge along there. You can then butt your second ruler against the first. Pull the fabric very carefully towards you so we don't move the rulers. Hang on to the first and slide the second, and then slide your first ruler and continue marking. You then cut and continue with your measurements and use exactly the same process again. So you've now cut your main part of your valance or your blind, and the next thing to do is cut the tabs. So you've got perhaps a little bit left from the length of the blind, the short one, and you should have plenty of material left. Don't forget that they need to be cut twice the length because they're going to loop up over the valance rod, and twice the width because we're going to fold them so that we get a nice self-lining on the inside. We're now going to make the tabs. You need a matching thread, and as a general rule we err on slightly darker than the fabric if you can't get an exact match, so err on the darker side. But because the seams are going to go in the middle like this on the back and we're not going to see them, I'm just going to use a plain white. Make sure that all your tabs are running in the same direction. This fabric, it doesn't really look much difference whether it's top or bottom, but some fabrics will, so keep an eye on the top so they're all going to run in the same direction when they're on the finished valance. And then all you do is fold in half and start to stitch. Now it's up to you if you want to pin, but they're so small they don't really need it. Make sure you have your correct seam allowance. I've got 1.5 centimeters here because of the fray on the fabric. The stitch length is 3, and very simply, when you get to the end of one, start your next one, and then you're not wasting great long lengths of thread. We've now got a long snake of tabs, so the next thing to do is simply separate them. Make sure that they're all running in the same direction. We're then going to just open them out so the seams are in the middle and press that seam open. So with the steam iron, just run up the center of that seam. Try and avoid ironing the sides, because we're going to turn it inside out and then press those sides exactly where we want them next. I use this little tool for turning the tabs inside out. It looks like a pair of tweezers, but it has some teeth at the top that will grip the fabric and a little slider here, so that when you've grabbed your fabric you can slide that up and tighten it. So all you need to do is grab an end, slide that down really tight, and then push through. So easy. I found it in a equivalent of a pound shop in Vietnam, but I'm sure if you look around you can find one. And then we just release it so the teeth can let go and pull it out. Then all we have to do is just find the middle and get that ready for pressing. You can see, as I said, how frayy this fabric is, and if we look at this one you can see how far down that's come, which is why when we sew it into the main fabric we need a good turn to be able to stitch everything together. Press with the seam as close to the center as you can get it. It doesn't have to be exact, it's not going to be seen, better to have it straight. And then press the other side, and that's it. The next thing is to sew the ends together. That's so that when we sew them into the main part of the blind, everything stays together. They don't shift because you're not going to be able to see them. Trim any odd bits off so that you can really see if they're level. Match them exactly along the top and the sides. You pin them if you want. I'm still using the white thread because this isn't going to be seen, so I'm stitching about a ½ centimeter down from the top. It's literally just to hold them together. And you can continue just the same way as you did before in a long snake.
Then you have another snake of tabs. We work the lining in exactly the same way. I buy it creased and lapped because I buy it in bulk and I find it easier to work with. So I have a nice straight crease here. So set square on the crease, measure along the bottom, good straight line, and continue as you did with the main fabric. The next thing to do is sew the edges of the valance together, right sides together, and make sure the lining and the top fabric sit really smoothly together, because you don't want your lining sticking out over the edge of the top fabric when your valance is finished. I'm going to use 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I'm using number 3 stitch length. The next thing we do is turn it inside out. So what you want to do is always make sure you've got a mark, which is the top of your fabric, until you've got your tabs in. So at this point you can check you've got a nice straight edge there with the lining inside, and press it at this point. Check the other side, really smooth, that your lining is sitting inside, and that you're going to have so that when your valance is finished, you're going to see the top fabric, not the lining, when that's pressed. So if you press now, you've got a nice crisp corner to start fixing your tabs in. At this point, measure across to make absolutely certain your blind is the width you want it. You can always take it in or let it out a little bit if it's not. Once you've measured across your blind to make absolutely sure it's the length you want and that it's going to cover the batten, we're then going to turn up the bottom edge and make a crease so that we can match the tabs to the crease, and because everything's now going to be worked from inside. So I'm turning up my hem. I've given it a 1.5 centimeter allowance. So I'm going to turn that up and then press it. So you've now got some nice crisp edges on the bottom of your valance and the sides. And the next thing to do is turn it inside out. And the reason we have this crease, that we've pressed it on the bottom, is that we can now, it's inside out, match those creases on both the top and the lining together, so that we can insert our tabs in the correct place, and we will eventually machine along that crease because we know it's exactly straight and where we want it. We're then ready to insert the tabs. So the first thing you can do is just check that they fit. Put one either end, and if you're lucky enough to have an odd number, which I have, you can find the middle and put one in the middle. It's then pretty easy just to line the other ones up in between, and just you can check your gaps and see that everything is as you want it to be. Okay, so then we just insert them. And remember that we're using the crease on the top fabric as a guide. This is going to be our stitching guide, and the bottom of the top fabric is the guide to line everything up. So line the bottom of the tab up with the bottom of the fabric. You can't see what's happening when you're machining, so it is a good idea at this point to pin them, and I put one in the middle and I'll put one at the bottom, and I like to go up from the bottom with my pin because I can then pull it out really easily when I'm machining. And you can continue just the same way, ends the center, and then you can put the two in and check your gaps, or have the same measurement. So all the tabs are now in place inside, and I can just stitch along the crease, because then we know we've got everything lined up inside. I'm still using a number 3 stitch, quick reverse.
And away we go. And the reason, as I said, I put these pins in, they're so easy to pull out. It just protects the needles. So just carefully along that line and everything should be in place. So just come to the end. Another quick reverse. And then time to check. Just snip off the corners to make it easier to turn. You'll get a crisper corner. And we can just turn inside out and have a look. So now that tabs are all out, and what I like to do, and it's just to make sure that the lining isn't going to hang down under the top fabric at any point, is just to run a row of top stitching across here. So that's my next job. Now, as I said, this is optional, but I find it gives a nice crisp edge and it holds everything in place. This thread is such a good colour, you can barely see it. You can perhaps see a little closer on this bit where the tab is. And I just stitch a couple of mil from the edge. I like to put pins in place because I want to really make sure the lining is staying out of the way and not going to roll over. But again, many options for you. So with the valance now finished, all very smooth at the bottom, keep everything in line, we just turn over and I'm going to measure from the bottom of my tab, and I want 34 centimetre total drop, pin in place and carry on across. We're now going to add the Velcro to the top of the valance. You want to set it a few mil down from the top. So with the wood we're going to fix the adhesive Velcro onto the front of it, but keep it to the top. So the reason we set the Velcro down a little way on the blind is because it will then match the adhesive Velcro that goes to the batten on the wall. As you can see, there's a little gap and we want our blind to cover the top of the batten. So back to the blind. Now you can press that top if you want to be sure. When you come to a corner, just miter that corner by folding it under. It just neatens the end, and then you can put your Velcro on, pin it in place, and I pin this way. Again, it's easier to remove when you're sewing the pin, and continue to the end. With your Velcro in place, follow the top of the fabric, not the Velcro, because you want all your lines to be even, and if something's a little bit out, it won't notice if you're following the top of the fabric. As I say, this thread is so close to the fabric, but I think you can probably just about see the indentation here where it's running. So once we've done that, you can do exactly the same process on the bottom of the Velcro. So that's the last of the machining done, and all we need to do now is give it a final press. So all finished, and all we have to do now is return it to the customer. The batten is painted, just need to wait for this to dry before we can do anything with it. I think you can see it's slightly shorter than the valance. Couple of 2-inch screws and some multi-purpose roll plugs. Once that's on the wall, I shall add on the adhesive Velcro, putting it quite close to the top. top and then staple it in a few places across. Hammer, just in case the staples haven't gone in. So that's the finished valance. That's going to look really good, replacing the blind, adding a lovely bit of decoration to the window and matching the tab-headed curtains that are there already. So we have the back and the front. I hope you found this video useful. If you'd like to see more videos on soft furnishings and reupholstery, please like, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I make more videos. Thanks for watching and good luck with your projects.